There's a number of different qualities that make somebody a great instructor or coach, whether it's the X's and O's of the golf swing, how people learn and process information, how to utilize that information, how to continually learn and stay up to speed on the latest and greatest in technology as far as what the scientific world is giving to the coaching industry. And my guest today has done all those things, and it's no surprise that she is on every top coach instructor list that's out there. She is a Golf Digest top 50 instructor. She's an LPGA top 50 instructor, Golf Magazine top 100 instructor. She also holds a master's degree in motor learning and control from the University of Columbia Teachers College. And she is a fantastic person that it's not going to take you long to realize that in today's show. Her name is Trillium Rose, and we have a lot of mutual friends, and everybody told me as good as she is at coaching, she is an even better person. And both of those things are going to be well illustrated in today's show. I had an extremely good time. This is one of the most enjoyable episodes I've had in almost 4 years of doing this podcast. Trillium has such a great energy about her. She has such a willingness to be forthcoming with what she has learned and how it will help others improve their game. We get really deep into motor learning, which is obviously her expertise, what it is, and really, if we wanted to go a little bit deeper into that, we discuss why golfers struggle so much, regardless of skill level, from beginner all the way to tour pro, in taking their improvements on the range to the golf course. And there are reasons for that, and there are things that you can do to navigate through that learning and that growth cycle. And Trillium was very, very kind to discuss the science behind it, to break that science down into ways that everybody is going to be able to understand what she's talking about, and then exercises that all of you and all golfers out there can utilize that will allow that process to happen so that your game continues on this upward trend. You can play better, you can have more fun, and just enjoy everything at a higher level. So just a fantastic conversation. Everybody, regardless of where you are in your game, is going to learn something from the mountain of information that she brings forward in today's show. I know just listening to her, and I thought I was pretty sharp on all this information. I took away a ton in this discussion, and I'm sure many of you will as well. So as always, please sit back, relax, and give a big, big Golf 360 welcome to my guest today, Trillium Rose. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This episode of the Golf 360 podcast is brought to you by Affinity Wealth Management Group. We all work exceptionally hard for our money, and none of us can afford to let that fall into the dark abyss of the big box financial service firms with their jack of all trades and master of none mantra, which basically means you become a number within a cookie cutter model, which is often accompanied by massive fees. Your future deserves more than average returns, and at Affinity Wealth Management, they ensure that your financial goals receive highly individualized, tailored attention from experts who are in the industry to be great and not average. As a client of Affinity Wealth, you will receive a customized solution to your customized life, keeping in mind your family's financial situation, values, and risk tolerance. Contact them today at 248-840-3863 or www.affinitywealth, wmg.com. And just like that, I'm live with the top 50 from Golf Digest, top 100 Golf Magazine. The very, very smart and very, very good Miss Trillium Rose.
Thanks, Brad.
So Trillium, yes, thank you for coming on. It's been a while. We've been back and forth, but it's I'm sure it's going to be well worth the time spent that I waited to talk to you.
I hope so.
Well, I noticed, to get off topic really quick, I noticed that you were out in Montana lately. It looked like an awesome trip. It is beautiful out. I was out in Jackson Hole back in January, and I mean, it's such a beautiful place. I mean,
I'd never been. I mean, I've been skiing. So my friends know I love to ski. I grew up in Vermont with a ski area in my town, 3 actually, Sugarbush and Mad River Glen, within 6 minutes getting on the mountain. So Vermont skiing's great, but it's definitely challenging because the weather is variable and the terrain can be narrow and definitely some steep pitches. And if it gets icy without snow, that's, you know, you have to make quick decisions. You have to turn, you have to be nimble, and you have to be kind of gutsy because if you're going fast, there's a tree right there. Anyway, out west is a whole new world. So I'm in love with the Rockies, but now I'm even more in love with Montana and that particular area. And the people there were awesome and down to earth and low key. No one's trying to prove anything to anyone with how great their outfits are. But I think moreover, I was skiing at Big Sky, and what separates in my mind Big Sky from other mountains is there is a extra peak on the top. So it looks like Zermatt, and other mountains you may have to hike if you want to get to those back bowls, if you want to get to the real steep chutes of some fresh powder that no one skied, you kind of have to hike. There's a tram to the top and there's a lift. So I am like, can't wait to get back out.
I grew up in Michigan, and I went skiing once. I always played basketball in the winter, and I got out of that with my knees intact. And buddies, they took me skiing once, and I got to I started on obviously the beginner hill and went down once, and they said, okay, you're ready, come on. And you know, it was fun. I can see how people really love it and they get addicted to it. But I got out of that, my youth, with my knees working, and they still work, knock on wood. And I just don't want to risk going down a ski slope as a beginner at my age.
I hear you.
Well, I want to jump into what you're expert at and you're very well known for and you're very good at, and that's motor learning, because you have a degree from Columbia in Teachers College in motor learning. And so I guess that to start out basics for somebody who's out there listening, whether they're a professional golfer and they might not be aware of it, how I would know, or if they're a beginner, or if they're an average everyday person that's playing golf, can you just to start describe what motor learning is?
Yeah, thank you for that. This is a big topic, and I think it's a topic that I think there's a lot of intuition surrounding how we learn to build skills. And certainly anybody who plays golf has some experiential knowledge because they've learned how to play golf. They've learned how to develop skills. So along the route of mastery, I think there are ways to bypass some of the ruts that we might get into, or the kind of slow pace. Well, I'm not really getting better, but I've been playing for a long time type of situations. So to answer your question directly, motor learning is the ability it's acquiring a skill, and it involves a neurological component because skill requires thinking first. And we're talking about voluntary motions, not involuntary, like blinking your eyes or things like that. Walking is a skill. You learn to walk, but there are other, sports skills you're not using quite as much. So it starts with a thought process in your brain, and that, the quick answer is it moves from a synapse in your brain to motor output in the motor neurons. And the ability to do so, officially, the ability to do something that you've learned would mean you can do it in many different environments under different conditions. i.e., can you take it to the course and compete
Yeah,
there?
yeah, we're definitely going to get into that because that seems to be everybody from people who just take up the game. And, we hear Tiger Woods talk about it or did talk about it where he called himself Ranger Rick, where he could hit it great on the range, but not take it to the course. But is there a differential between the motor learning and let's say intentionality? And that intentionality would mean you have to have a direction you're going for the motor learning to occur. And that you're just not, it's like you're using intentionality, meaning you have a map instead of just wandering and hope that you find the place that you want to get to.
Yeah, I can frame that in a certain way, but there are a lot of different conversations around intention. So if you let me, can I put a finer point on maybe the discussion
Of course.
and
Sure.
say, if we're looking to, because this is a golf podcast, if we're looking to, let's say, make a change in something that we already do, how about that? So
Sure.
let's say you have a tendency to chunk your chips. Not you, Pete, because you've never chunked a chip, right?
No, never.
Let's say you have a tendency to just donk, and you're trying to just, okay, number one is really understanding what you're doing that's creating the problem. And that could be something you don't even realize. So I think it's helpful to have either a second set of eyes or a video on you. And okay, let's suppose the reason you're chunking is because you are not rotating your torso through. And you and you realize, aha, now I know what it is. So the intention part is to say, okay, I want some intention to feel a change in this move. So that intention could be, it just has to be pretty explicit, and it has to be pretty careful before you make each shot if there's a habit that you're trying to change. So intention is the bedrock of making change. Let me say it again.
Mm-hmm.
So intention is the mother of change, because if you don't think about what you're trying to do, you're probably going to do what you've always been doing. Now, if you're happy with what you're doing, great. If you're trying to make a change, you're going to have to think initially about what that adjustment is you're trying to do. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
When you work with somebody and you're working on this, and given all the ways that you have to advise somebody on how to either make a change, or if they're a beginner and they're getting started, to understand that that it's not just going to come, that they have to put some effort into it. How do you get across to them that being uncomfortable, and usually golfers have had some success in the business world because it is an expensive sport, and they're used to being having accomplishment and being successful, and now they're going to come into an arena where they're not successful and the frustration level gets very high. And then as coaches, it's a job to understand that and be able to guide them and coach them on how to become better and continue their improvement. How would you go about that? Let's just take a 18 handicap.
Yeah, that's right.
To use an example.
That's right. I found that those who have played sports at a high level, I'd even consider D1 a high level, have usually gone through the process of being uncomfortable and realized that you have to sweat and you have to grind and you have to put yourself in positions where it's not easy. Because why wouldn't it be easy? It's not easy because it's new and it's different and it's something that you're not used to doing. So that inherently is what change is all about. It's about making yourself do something that you haven't already done. So it could be uncomfortable in the beginning because you don't know anything. All of it's uncomfortable. Like a new grip is uncomfortable. None of it feels right. And I often talk to new players and say, none of this is going to feel good, but trust me, it's going to start to feel okay. Now, if you're an 18 handicap, you've had some success on the golf course doing whatever you've been doing. Probably a lot of it's good and a lot of it could be improved upon. If you're an 18, there's reasons why you're not a 5. So that means, first of all, pinpointing what those issues are that are costing you strokes. And who knows what it is. It could be an acute issue where you're constantly hitting it to the right because the face is open, or it could be
Mm-hmm.
something all over the place and you're just a constant bogey golfer because the mess is all over in every single shot. So once you pinpoint where that is, where kind of the gaping hole is, or as I call the hole in the boat. So if the mast of the boat is not up, that's okay. You're not bringing in any water. If you can at least keep the ball in play, you're okay. But if you're spraying the ball into places where it's costing you penalty shots, you got to figure that out. So
Mm-hmm.
the diagnostic is really helpful. And this is where I like Arcos, because Arcos is an on-course tracker. I'm ambassador of Arcos, so I'm plugging it. But at the same time, I was first a user. And I think that it's such a good tool because it's one thing to know what you're doing on the range. It's another thing to know what you're doing in play. So great, you can hit the tee shot 100, 220 off the tee. But when I look at your data and I see you're hitting it like 150 to 160 on average, that's giving me a big red flag that something's not happening on the golf course that we need to address and figure out.
You had mentioned it at the neurological level as people make adaptations. And I think for a long time, up until recent times, recent meaning within the last, say, decade, maybe 15 years, that neurological sequencing patterns was always described as muscle memory. And I think that as the literature has come out there and it's more widely accepted that it's not so much muscle memory as it how your brain develops patterns. From the study you had, why is it so much easier for younger kids to, for example, a toddler who's learning how to walk? They see people walking, they see their parents walking, their siblings walking, and they get themselves to walk by visually seeing this happen, and they want to gravitate towards that and be a part of it. And they seem to be able to overcome the difficulties much easier compared to somebody who's either an entrepreneur and had a successful business or whatever success they had in another sport. And now it just seems to be that the challenge of overcoming the most basic of golf moves, they get very frustrated very easily. Is it a comfort level that infants don't have yet and people are used to? How does that work as far as the brain? And this might be getting a little nerdy into the science of the brain, but hell, I got the expert on. I might as well ask and let you just run.
Yeah,
run with
the nerdy part's where I'm most comfortable. So when a kid is learning, so first of all, early in learning, it's really early in development. A child's brain is developing so fast, much, much, much faster than a 30-year-old. So about 25, this is unfortunate to hear, but about 25 is when your brain stops growing.
The final pruning process of the neural development.
Yeah. So there is a lot going on at a very high pace, and a child is wired, for lack of a better word, to be able to pick up motions out of survival and really quickly at that. And a kid can't communicate with words, but can communicate by seeing and doing. And there's a particular like survival to be able to put one's hand on food and put it into your mouth, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Or to stand up and walk from one place to the next. So I think it's hard to compare a kid with an adult from that because our brains are so different and doing such different things in the developmental process. Motor learning, this term was kind of a crossroads of psychology and neuroscience. So there was a professor named Anne Gentile who was at Columbia for a long time, and she had 2 PhDs actually, and she really looked at movement science in a new way that no one had done. And she had looked at how similar the questions in psychology were to the questions in neuroscience. And she said, this is a niche expertise that we haven't really identified before, but I'm just going to call it motor learning. That was in the 70s. So from the very beginning, movement scientists knew that the muscles didn't have memory. It was in the brain. But I think the easy way of describing it is muscle memory. And sometimes I'll even throw that out there. Like, what are you an expert at? Well, motor learning, or muscle memory, as probably you're familiar with, right? Because it makes sense. It makes sense when you can do something with some sense of automaticity and you don't have to think about it. But that pattern that you don't have to think about is actually stored in your brain, or in the procedural part, the basal ganglia, in the back part of your brain. So the front part of your brain is your prefrontal cortex. This is the executive command center. And this is where the high processing, high functioning happens. So you're driving in a car and you see a car coming at you, and you want to move to the other lane. You know, this is all prefrontal cortex stuff. We're having a conversation. We're pretty active in this prefrontal cortex. Now, reactions and reflexes and impulses, those are in a different part, and those are in a part that don't require quite as much energy. Now, when you're learning something for the first time, or if you're trying to make an adjustment, let's say you didn't like the top of your backswing and you want to change the top of your backswing. For example, let's say you've had a huge amount of success playing on tour and you decide that you actually just want to change your backswing because you didn't like it for some reason. Let's just say.
Because you had nothing else to do. Just let's change the backswing.
Because you have nothing else to do. But you know it could be better. Let's just say you won by 12 shots and you still want to change. So that process of making a change actually is the same process that, our niece or nephew might make when they're 12 learning golf for the first time. That process of learning something is the same. Now, what starts here is a thought. Okay, I want to be, let's say I want to be here, not here, or I want to be here, not here. So when let's say my nephew has been going back, he's going back like this, full extension with the lead wrist, and maybe across the line with a little bit of elbow bend, make it really obvious. So to feel the adjustment, to know about the adjustment, first it requires some heavy cognition, some heavy discussion where things might be, and some elements of feedback, like using a mirror or video or biofeedback, where you could hear, an audible tone where your wrists are, et cetera. All these training aids that are out there that can give you feedback. What those are doing is helping our system identify something different. So our ability to make the adjustment is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help someone, like as a coach, I'm trying to help someone's feedback system become better so that they know the difference.
On the feedback system, would you have them perform the movement to how they think they should do it, and then allow them to look, let's say, in a mirror to see if they've done it correctly at the top, as we're using the top of the backswing wrist position as an example. So would you have them focusing their gaze at the ball and then make their backswing and have that different feel, and then look in the mirror to see if they've done it correctly? And if they didn't, then they've got to go back and get a little more uncomfortable.
Oh, sure.
Until that uncomfortable produces the result that they want, and then try to replicate that.
Sure. I love that. And if somebody's ready to kind of guess to see if they're there yet, I would think that in most cases, people would get there within an hour of training or 10 minutes of training. Like early in training, you probably could get to a place where you could have someone, like I like someone to be able to guess before the end of an hour session. I want them to be able to find it on their own. So my job as a coach is to help somebody figure out how to do it on their own. And that ultimately is feel.
It's amazing how many people will, when I work with somebody, you make a change, whatever the change is, and then I'll tell them, well, you're about 50% there. And they'll be, yeah, but it feels like I'm just doing the complete opposite of what I was. I said, okay, on this next swing, do it as opposite as you can possibly imagine. And they'll do it, and it's usually right. And I'm like, yeah, that's how far you need, that's how far you are from where you need to get to. So just not to beat them up mentally, but just to say, look, there's a lot of progression that needs to take place, because you are on one end of the spectrum per se, and we're moving you all the way to the other end, and you have a natural disposition to want to drift back to the comfort level. I mean, I think as animalistic beings, we're going to have that need for comfort.
You're exactly right. I used to teach at Jim McLean Golf School when it was at Doral, and Jim used an analogy which I really thought was helpful for people learning, but it also matches up well with the science in this conversation about making exaggerations so people can feel, what they feel like is real is often not real. Like, oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
going to be good. It's usually not good. So if under the conversation of making a change, right? If it's new and change,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Yes.
I feel like I'm doing it. It's comfortable. Well, if it's comfortable and you've been doing this for a long time, that way it means you haven't made the change. So the analogy, right? The analogy was an airplane. So if an airplane is tilted completely to the side and you're trying to get the airplane back to right itself straight up, you'd have to crank the wheel all the way to the left to get it to straighten out. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're exaggerating the feel until it straightens out. And there's going to be a point where you don't want to exaggerate it anymore. So I'm very careful about how much direction I'm giving someone to exaggerate so that they know where the parameters are. So if they've overdone it, they don't come back with a new problem.
And part of doing that, the use of internal versus external cues are the two methods, I would say. You tell me if I'm wrong. Are the two methods that get people to do that? Is that correct?
Okay, so yeah. You've
To go into
done a lot
chapter
of work,
two.
Pete. you're popping up all these terms. And so internal and external feedback, if we just back up and define them. So an internal feedback descriptor would be feeling an adjustment in one's body. So I feel like your wrist is cupped at the top as an example, or
Mm-hmm.
feel let's rotate your pelvis to 90 degrees, for example. An external feedback could be I'm going to put a ball in front and just avoid hitting the ball if we're trying to change swing direction, for example. So external feedback would be the type of feedback that's outside of one's control in their body and more outward, like land it close to that flag. So another way of saying it would internal feedback is how to do the motion. External feedback is make that happen with the ball or the club.
Would external also be the use of training aids?
Yeah, you could use, well, yeah, it depends on how you use the training aid. I mean, there's certainly lots of training aids that are making adjustments to your internal feedback, like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like anything that's really going to tie or touch your body or make your body do something is, or it's called congruent feedback. It's something that's actually going to make the change for you. That would be an internal feedback type of training aid. Whereas,
So the external is developing the internal in that instance.
and
Is that fair to say?
that is the theory. And so Gabby Wolf, who's at UNLV, has made her career into studying internal, external, and Dr. Bob Christina, who's a professor emeritus at Chapel Hill, he and Eric Alpenfels, they've looked at internal, external quite a bit with putting and with golf, and their research tends to fall onto the side of external as being more beneficial than internal. Now, notice I didn't say it's always better to do external. Now, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Wolf will, and we've had conversations about this, has claimed that all the research points to external being more beneficial. As a practitioner, I can't agree with that because I just don't have the evidence that she has claimed to find. I have the experiential in the trenches, boots on the ground experience on this. Not to mention, there are a few papers that have pointed to external feedback as being. So if anybody's interested in those papers, just DM me. I'm happy to share. But the point being, there's a variety of ways that people need to learn. Now, let me go through this one paper. This was Chicado and Perkins. Chicado, Perkins, and Lee did this paper, and they took two groups of golfers, a novice group and an expert group, and each group they gave two sets of directions, same two sets. So the expert group, they said, so the task was to hit a ball to a 50-yard target. So the expert group, they gave them internal directions. And then, later on in the day, they gave them external. So the expert group, they said, hit it close to that pool noodle. And then they also said, not exactly sure what the perfect cue was, but I think it was something to do with the lead arm and the wrist, something to do
Mm-hmm.
with how you make the motion. They gave the same set of directions to the beginner golfers. They said, all right, guys, hit it to the 50-yard marker. And then later they said, here's how you do it. Hit it to the 50-yard marker, but you're going to do it with, I don't know, a lead arm and wrist without, a lot of wrist rotation, something like that.
Yeah, maybe take your lead arm to this length, and then you go ahead and make,
how to do it versus what to do. So they found that the novices did better with the internal directions, and the experts did better with the external directions. So the experts, so you and I that play golf, if you tell me how to do something that I already know how to do, that may be more disruptive than you're telling me get it to there. As opposed to the beginners who have no flipping idea how to get it there. So they need some help of how to do it. Yeah, okay, great. I'd love to hit it to 50, but how do I hit it to 50? Give me something, right? That kind of thing. So anyway, so that kind of brings us back to this discussion of internal versus external. It's such a misguided conversation at times, because it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be a both. It could also be a give somebody internal if they really can't feel the adjustment they're trying to make. Give them some help of how to do that. So the casting, okay, well, how about some awareness in the trail arm and the trail wrist? How about some awareness of what that might feel like? Or don't cast, all right. So if you're trying to get a change in casting, you could also say, all right, I want you to swing really hard. Well, swinging really hard for one person who's played baseball might intuitively know they need to rotate their pelvis, and their sequencing might like fall right into place perfectly. But someone who's never thrown a ball may just cast even worse. So they may need to have those explicit directions on how to do something. You see what I'm saying? So this is why it's not a perfect little column. Oh, do this, not that.
Yeah, it seems to be. Well, let me before the next question would be, how do you differentiate between if someone is internal and external? Like, is there a way to measure? Like, okay, Mike Adams, use him and Terry as an example. That they have their measurement system for grip and position a lead arm at the top, and their whole system, which I think is exceptionally good. If you go into the nutritional realm, everyone, half the people out there say, well, drink your body weight in ounces in water a day. It's like, well, how do you know if you need that? What if you're flooding you're just washing all the nutrients and minerals and vitamins out of your system? So, I had Dr. Mike Hollis on, naturopath, that was talking about, how do you know? It depends. And I'm learning that, in that field, it depends. In the training world, you don't prescribe somebody to do squats when they don't have they have the range of motion in their joints. You don't just prescribe this overreaching thing that everyone says, well, these things are good, so you as a golfer should do it. It all depends on the individual. So now, as I come back to the question, at what points, as you are an expert in identifying these things, so for a young coach or any coach out there, or a parent who's trying to help their child, how do you know when to use an external cue, and how do you know when to use an internal, if that's even possible? That person's lacking, that's would be the benefit to them.
This is the conversation that coaches should be having. And this is exactly the right way of parsing this out. How do you know? Well, I like having a lot of options as a teacher and coach. So this is one of the reasons I've taken a ton of lessons, and I've traveled to tons of conferences. And I feel like every time I talk to someone who's been doing it too, I learn something, and I'm going to learn something from you today. Because I want to be able to have those options. I'm going to start with external always. I always do. And I do that because I want to respect that the player has something that they don't have to change or learn or I want to see where they are, and I would love it. So after someone goes through that period of thinking, and then they can produce the skill, that prefrontal cortex activity actually starts to die down. And so when we become more comfortable with something, our more procedural part of the brain has more of that activity. And there's some great fMRI studies on that, pre and post learning, of where that activity happens in the brain. And there's still so much more to do, but it's kind of an eye-opening thing to see that when you don't have to think, you can do something. Well, you can see where that activity is. Now we know too from experience and playing golf with friends that if you ask someone after their best round ever, or maybe your best or my best round, what were you thinking? And the answer inevitably is almost not a lot. Like it was just happening. And
Pointing and going. I call point and shoot.
Point and shoot, right? And in other sports, like I played college lacrosse, I can think of all the really important plays that happened that I wasn't thinking as much. It was more intuitive, and it felt like it was in slow motion. And when we're asking someone to then go back. Now, by the way, Cyan Baylock did a tremendous amount of great research on this. She had a study that was published in Nature. Was it Science? I think it was Science magazine, and it was on kids that were performing standardized math tests, and why they did really badly. Like why do they choke? And although that was although her studies were more in the psychology domain, they actually apply to motor learning too. So choking is when you already know how to do something and you get in your own way. So I was thinking too much about how I'm supposed to do it, and I pulled myself out of my feel and into my head. Well, that actually lines up with how we learn and how we perform well. So to kind of answer your question, when do you ask someone to think, and when do you ask someone to actually make those adjustments internally? Only if I really have to, if they need to solve something that they're not solving quickly.
I have a couple students right now, and they're all, well, one's a relative beginner, and if he breaks 100, he's happy. And I was very happy that after our first lesson, he messaged me back and said, I broke 90 for the first time. So I must be doing something right, because he's got a lot going on. So I've got this wide range of stuff. It's like, God, to me, it's all equal. He needs help in all of it, because he's got a lot of speed for a beginner. I mean, he's got the stack now, got him connected with Sasho. And in a guy that plays twice a month because he has a newborn, his swing speed's 112 miles an hour, just stock. For a stock guy who shoots 100, I think that's pretty good compared to what his potential. I could see him really cranking it up. But he and I've got two other guys right now, two students that when they come to me, they know just enough about golf and with YouTube and social media, and they're on there trying to figure this out at home. Because I understand it's what they like. They have a passion for it, so they want to learn it, and they're trying to absorb, even though it can get in their way. They might gravitate towards something and say, "Hey, I was doing this." Like, well, you just completely unraveled what we did last week. But what my point is, try as a coach and understanding what they need, an internal, external cue. They'll usually have, while they're warming up and hitting balls, about 4 or 5 thoughts in their head, and you can just see their mind spinning. And if I do this, and they'll even say, when I do this, I seem to hit it good. And then the next 3 balls, they do it and they hit it terrible. So I'll let them work themselves through that. And then based off just experience watching students for decades, then I'll make a determination. Okay, they're going to need an external cue, or they're going to need an internal cue for the next 20 minutes that we're going to change what I think they need changed. But I found that allowing them to go ahead and burn through what's in the front of their brain, so to speak, and then let them finally, it wears itself out. And then when they're tired out, then they say, you can see what's really happening.
Yeah,
and
that's good, especially.
It's easier to determine what path you're going to take from there.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I call it, I like to let people have what they normally do. I like people to have, how do I phrase this? I like to perform non-invasive surgery. So the least amount of change that we can do to produce the biggest gains is generally the route that I take. So if somebody has a swing that they may not like the look of, but it works mostly, we're going to keep it and try to find the one or two things that's going to make a big impact, as opposed to a wholesale change. Wholesale changes are so expensive in time and in work. So not to mention if you need to hire a coach on that, but they don't always produce what you want them to produce because you have to put so much into it. So for example, I think all of us who play golf have made changes over the years, but the question is, what are you willing to keep? What do you need to change? And what's worth the change? Right. Mm-hmm. So that's where making a good diagnostic decision, or at least that's where knowing where your shots are working and where they're not working is really helpful, because that can help guide how you make those changes and what you do to change.
Yeah, over I would say the last, it was about 12 years ago that I started doing it, asking more questions while they're warming up. So, if they're misses to the weak side, or if they're hitting a hook, and then the next step would be, do you do that when the wind is from this direction or the trouble's from this side? Because now you get an understanding of what they're going through their brain. Do you hit that shot in this condition, but do you not hit it in this condition? So it starts to develop a picture of the unlimited, the millennial thing, or not millennials age, but the millions and millions of things that we deal with as coaches that could be wrong in somebody's swing, and the way to fix it. I think the more you can narrow it down to specific, the better chance that we have to get them doing what they want to do and understanding them better and extracting that information, because they don't know. I mean, students at every level I have found, when you say, are you doing it? They will usually say yes to most of your questions because they're coming to you as the expert. They're kind of putting all of their things aside, and they're throwing themselves out there and say, I need help to get this better. So if you say something, the tendency is for them to agree. So I learned many years ago that you have to start, part of your job, if you're going to help them, you have to extract it, because they're just going to agree with you no matter what you say.
I love that, Pete. Really open-ended questions, and ask people to just explain where they are. Yeah. And in seeing what someone's doing, I love watching what someone's doing and asking them to tell me about a shot that they just hit. Tell me about that. What happened there? What do you think? What did you feel? How'd you do that? Right. So there could be so much variety to how somebody answers it. Oh, I loved it. Meanwhile, I'm looking at it as like a weak toe swipe, but because it got in the air, the person's happy. Mm-hmm. So I also like looking at patterns. I mean, as much as I think it's important for us to communicate and be good with people and be able to really look over someone's shoulder and say, what are you working on? How are you doing it? How can I help you? Data is really, really helpful. Numbers are so helpful. So I really lean on data quite a bit when I'm making diagnostics and when I'm explaining things. So if somebody's taking a stab at their long irons that they haven't been hitting well, I'll just look at the pattern and say, here we go. Look at your pattern on the swing direction. It's been negative, between -5 and -8, or 10 even. Look at, here's a double digit. And let's look at why. And you're hitting the toe on top of that. So let's look at where this issue is going wrong. You've done it 10 times in a row. Why is this happening? Let's figure out why.
Yeah, I've also found out that it's easier to get female students to open up about what they're doing and what they're feeling, much more so than it is to get males about it. And I've had the discussions. I won't even call it an argument or debate with some people who have said, oh, that's not true. And that's just getting into staying away from the gender argument. I'm saying, okay, let me phrase it to you this way. When men are driving and they're lost, they don't ever want to ask for directions. When women are driving and they're lost, they will ask for directions the minute they don't know where they're going. I said, yes. So I said, you take that and use that how you want, but I use that in the golf world because I'm seeing the exact same thing, that it is much easier for females and women to to tell me this is what I'm feeling. This is when this happens. And men, I got to sit there and just like pulling teeth. It's like, and sometimes I just get to the point. It's like, well, you came to me for help. How am I supposed to help you if you don't really want to tell me what's going on? And we'll talk more about men and women in golf in a little bit. But the next thing I want to jump into is as we talk about these things, motor learning and internal, external. So people are working on these things. Why is it that every skill level, regardless of where they are in their game, can do it once they get to a point where they can do it on the range? They have a very difficult time taking it to the golf course. Does it have to do with now that the brain is so turned on and stimulated by variables? You got wind, you got distance, you got water, sand, all these other things, playing competitors or partners. And where on the range you don't, you're just focused on one thing. And now let's put it into the real world and with all these distractions and see how well you can perform. Or is it something else?
So it's complicated, but yes to what you just said, and a little more. So
okay, so I am on the right path.
Oh yeah, you're totally. I mean, you're totally on. And I think most people who have experienced that probably intuitively feel the same frustration, or they kind of understand like there's more going on in a golf course. That's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that when you're on a driving range, it's flat. And when you're in a golf course, it's not flat. When you're driving range, you've got multiple attempts and you've got a wide open fairway and your targets are not as constricted. And on a golf course, you don't. So the golf course is a next level environment in terms of the variability that you're going to encounter. So I think that the discussion usually comes back to, okay, well, if we're trying to improve our performance in a variable environment and we don't get multiple chances, why don't we practice like that? Okay. Yeah. And there's the handful of really good coaches out there, and you're probably one of them, that have created ways for people to produce, a varied and variable practice scenario. And that's really part of the answer is to, if you're going to play, practice playing. Practice, or at least if you can't get on a golf course easily, create ways to recreate a similar experience, like gamify your practice. So you've got one ball, two balls, you've got points, you've got a consequence for how that ball acts and reacts to the ground. As opposed to just moving on the range and thinking about how you're going to move, because you don't really want to be thinking about how you're moving when you're playing. You just want it to happen. But that's a state that we have to earn by putting a lot of time and experience and practice into it. So
yeah, because there's been a lot of discussion on that on social media, and I have the most respect for both of these guys. They've both been on the show. And I enjoy both of them. I think they're both right. And I have talked to both of them about how it can be modified. As Twitter and Insta, those places, you're only allowed so many characters. So getting the point across how you want is really never, you're never able to do that. But, Scott Fawcett is very big on the block practice. And you got a guy like Stuart Morgan, who's getting his doctorate in performance and how do you variable practice. And it's like, well, which one do you use? And if what I've always done with students is if somebody comes to me and says, I have a member guest in 6 weeks, or I have a club championship, whatever tournament is in X amount of weeks, it's like, okay, let's break this time up. And so if we have a mechanical adjustment in their swing, I'll tell them, let's say 90% of your time for the next week is going to be spent in mirror work, in KVS feedback, anything, so that you can focus on the change. The next week to two is going to be spent maybe half the time on that, and then half the time utilizing on the golf course. And then slowly we'll transition to where it's the majority of the time on the golf course. And if they make the mistake or they can't hit that shot, then they go back and they can, in an evening or wherever, they can do their mirror work or whatever device they're using, so that by the time they're at the event, they've made this transformation they've made the physical change, but they've also have the mental aspect that their brain isn't focused on that solely, that we've graduated them into golf course variables, adjusting on the go, and so on. And both of the guys agree that, yes, that's a very good way. But if you look at their stuff on some social media, the discussions, people would categorize them as, well, Scott's only this way and Stuart's only this way, when that's not the case at all. So I don't know if there was a question in that or not, but
I'm
I
not
guess
familiar with Stuart Morgan. I gotta look him up. I love it.
okay. Yeah, I'll send you his stuff. He's very good. Stuart ran the International Junior Academy for a while here in Bluffton off Hilton Head, and then he's back in the UK. He works with a number of the European and some of the live players now, and a number of world-class players, as well as golf school stuff. But he's got some very, very cool stuff on learning and practice and variability and all those things.
Right.
And, I mean, I called him one morning. We had a 20-minute conversation while he was walking his dog on a Sunday morning about this. It was supposed to be 3 minutes. And I said, Stuart, it's Sunday. You go ahead and enjoy your family. I don't want to, I mean, we could have made a podcast session right there, but yeah, he's got some great stuff.
I love that. I love that. And there's also a guy I think he finished his PhD and he's writing a book on blocked and random practice with golf. So that's really great. I was on a panel with Scott Fawcett recently, and this topic came up on variability. Were you there at the open forum?
No, I was going to go and I couldn't get away, but I was so mad that I couldn't get down there because it's like the first one since COVID, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I think if I included you, I think over half the panel has been on the show. So I really wanted to make it, but so I was very disappointed that I didn't.
Yeah, this conversation of repeatability was the topic. And so we had Marty Jensen to my left, who was looking at golf ball, and on my right was Eric Henderson. Eric, oh my gosh.
Oh, from Ping.
Yeah. Hendrickson.
Yes.
And also PhD as an engineer. And then I was in the middle, and then Scott was over there. And Nick Novak as well from Golf Tech. So the conversation had a bit of a meandering personality to it, where it kind of went all over the place. But the real discussion, I think, is how do you get someone to repeat what they want to do on a golf course, and why are you seeing variability? So back to your original mention of the two. Well, there's not one perfect way for each person. However, to create a skill that you can count on without a question of doubt, every single person in the scientific field agrees that you need repetition on it. You need experience. So you're not going to get good because you're thinking about it. Although thinking about it is better than not thinking about it, but it's not as good as actually doing it. So putting the reps in, putting the time in. So let's go from there. So everybody agrees, okay, you got to practice, but what do I practice? How do I practice? I think that's where we are at this. So there are so many papers on this particular issue, starting in the 30s in typing. Right? Like, this question's been asked so many.
This hasn't just popped up because it's in the golf world. It's been around for a little while.
This has been up for a long time. The National Academy of Sciences hired a team of scientists to look into this as well, because they were curious about a number of things, including how much training does a private need before they're ready to go into combat? How much time does someone need to learn how to load and shoot and point a gun and shoot the gun at a target, and before they can move into another type of training, right? Can we just give them basic 2-3 hours and call it a day? What do we have to do so that we know we can count on them when it counts and they're sent out? So that's a pretty big deal. I want to say that's a bigger deal than playing golf, but maybe some people would disagree with me. So in other words, in typing, this was during the war, when Morse code typers, they needed to hire a lot of Morse code typers, and they weren't quite sure how to get people onboarded quickly. So one question was, do we just give them the same sentence to type all the time? Or do we give them like the lazy, what is it? The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, over and over and over. Or do we give people new sentences that they have to type differently each time? So the same sentence over and over, or you could even look at it as like A, B, 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 C, 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 D, D, learning all the things. So what they found is you give somebody the same exact over and over and over and over and over pattern, we'll call that blocked practice, did really well in practice. They did really well in practice, but then when you gave them a retention test or a transfer test, so when you gave them, okay, here, you're going to learn the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, in a row, and you're going to do that for 20 minutes. Now we're going to give you a sentence. So that would be the retention or transfer test. Okay, so after you do the practice, how do you perform? Versus another group where they gave them different sentences all the time. And that would be random. Now, the random group did terribly in practice. They were making mistakes. They were slow. But when you gave them the training test, the block practice people dropped significantly and did terribly, whereas the random did great. That was eye-opening because I think intuitively, you feel like you should do what feels good in practice. You're doing it, you're getting quick, you're really good at it, it's happening, but your brain is not having to think so much about each move after you've memorized it because you're just doing it the same way each time. Whereas the randomized group, and by the way, the same study has been replicated so many times in so many different ways with so many different tasks. So I think at this point, it's safe to say, and there have been great review papers on this, that the strongest repetition, in other words, the best way to make a repetition, the best way to hit a ball, let's use for golf, the best way is to give yourself a shot that's new that you have to retrieve from memory somehow. You have to solve that problem for the first time. And solving that problem is going to strengthen your ability to do it again and to remember it. Because there's a bit of work in that solving. In the solving, okay, ball's above the feet now. Okay, I've got to remember how to do this. Or I've got to intuitively figure this one out. I'm going to move my hands down the grip and I'm going to aim a little bit more to the right and, or whatever. Or it's a tight line. I've got a wedge in my hand. I just want to make sure I just get that club through the turf. So if you don't have to solve for something, you don't have to think, you're not doing much work. And that is really the key. And especially in golf, when we have so many problems you have to solve every single time, and you haven't done any work to prepare for it, how do you expect yourself to play well? And especially under pressure.
I think it was Sebastian Junger, he's an author and he wrote Tribes. He was I don't know if you're familiar with who he is. He was what do they call him? A journalist that goes out with the military. Whatever they call him, it's not important. But I believe it was him. I don't know if he was on Rogan or if he was on Tim Ferriss, whoever he was on, but he was talking about the differences in military, who were the special forces groups, and then there was the infantry groups. And the infantry groups were much more calm when they were not in combat or anywhere close to going into combat. And then their anxiety levels had huge spikes in it the closer they got to and then engaged in combat and warfare. Where the special forces had trained so much and were so well prepared, when they were not in any sort of combat mode whatsoever, their anxiety levels were much higher. Baseline was much higher. But the closer they got to putting themselves into those positions, everything else started to lower, so that they were reaching their comfort zone. And so to your point about the typing, if one is preparing in certain ways, whether it be block or variable or random or whatever someone wants to call it, and they're doing it one way, yet to implement it in real world time, they're going to have to do it in a bunch of different ways. And then you got one group that's doing it in every single way possible. They're doing block, they're doing variable, and then they get put in because they're trained to be put in the most difficult situations where they're going to have to know all the ways to use it. But it's interesting how the brain and the body adjusted as that development occurred. So it was very difficult for the special force people to come back into a normal societal situation where it was much easier for the general militia to do so. That's very so interesting.
And you can think of all of the issues that would arise if you are a commander or you're in charge of a giant group of people. How are you going to create environments for that huge group where special forces is obviously a much smaller number that
Hmm.
you can create, and you've got a much bigger budget and you have many more explosives you can be blowing off, and you can put them into crazier situations that are expensive, and which is why it's an elite group. They've got a huge budget to, to be able to train that way. I wonder, I'm sure somebody has done tons of research on military training in other countries. Like I'm thinking of like the Israeli army, for example, that's always
Yes. The
always
Mossad.
working, right? So there's a lot of parallels with this, right? So train, you train hard, and it makes for easy combat. Easy training makes hard combat.
So you had mentioned, so training for the gut. Let's say somebody has taken a lesson from you, and we'll go back to our lead arm and lead wrist position, and they've really got it. They can do it without looking at it, and they can look in the mirror and they're spot on. They even got to the point where they can hit all the way. Let's say that even their driver 50% or more of the time that they can do it correctly, and they get the shot pattern that they want to. But they're having trouble going to the course. You had mentioned doing some drills. What would those drills be? Or can you give an example of what those drills would be? So somebody out there who's in that position or trying to go from range to golf course, what would an example be?
Great. So the first question I would always ask myself or the student is, have they really learned this, or are they merely performing it? Did they really put the work in to make these changes? Because the time of doing it is a huge amount of the answer here. So doing and versus learning, you see that a lot in a lesson. Someone's like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is the greatest lesson ever. You fixed me. No, I didn't fix anything. I'm merely giving you a starting point. Now you need to take this and go do the actual work. So meaning just because you understand now and you can see it, that doesn't mean that it's going to stick. You have to.
Yeah, you don't have
You
it.
don't have it. You're just doing it. You may be extremely athletic, that you can do it in one. And this is where it becomes very dangerous with these elite athletes. They can make tons of changes quickly. Oh, you want me to do that? I can do that. You want me to do this? I can do this. But be, danger, beware that that's not ready to go out in prime time yet.
That's not developing the skill. That's just understanding what the skill needs to
and
be.
you still haven't learned it. So here's a couple drills on the lead wrist, let's say. So I like using the golf course as a more sophisticated practice area. If you can you get into a golf course? Can you get a tee time that's later in the day where you're not going to hold anyone up? Can you play with some people that aren't going to mind if you hit 2 shots? Try to get into a twosome and get behind a foursome, so you've got a lot of extra time, and figure out a way to get the feel on the golf course when you have 1 shot at it, and that's it. See, and do not worry about results, because you're going to hit some terrible shots in the act of making this adjustment. The worst thing you could do is say, okay, I've got it. Now I'm going to go play with my buddies in a money match. Or now we're going to go on a trip and we're going to go play Pinehurst #2. Okay, well, forget it. You're not going to go out on a limb with this new move, right? With your buddies when it counts, and a new golf course you want to do well. Forget that. So you got to dial down your expectations, get ready to make some big mistakes, and really figure out if you're doing what you think you're doing. And that may even take a video, or it may take some way for you. If you can stop and look, great.
Develop like a pre-shot routine. Like Mike Weir used to have that big waggle that he would do. Like that was his
a little half back
cue.
swing.
Yes, half backswing. Yeah.
Yeah, a half backswing threw me off so many times. I was at the Masters video back when they could let you videotape. I was there for a practice round, and I was following Mike Weir because he had done really well. I think he almost won it the year before, and man, oh man, he threw me off so many times. I'd hit record, and then it was like a fake out. It took me like 5 holes to realize he does that on every shot. Yeah. So what are some other drills? Okay, some other drills would be putting yourself in a position where you have to solve it from scratch. So you hit a drive, then go back to your iron, to put the iron in your hand. or give yourself only 5 chances to do it. And if we're trying to make an adjustment to a feel in your body, you have to somehow have a way of knowing whether you've done it or not. And if the outcome of the ball is working for you, like if that is the way for you to figure out if you've done it, like you've been hitting the heel and now you're hitting the center of the face, great. But it's going to be different for everybody depending on what the adjustment is. So it's hard for me to make one blanket statement, but figure a really clean, clear way that you can trust yourself that you've made the adjustment in the movement that you're happy with, and then hold yourself accountable to that.
And is that putting an extra variable in there that the brain starts to focus on? Let's say the prefrontal cortex, as you mentioned earlier, to where now instead of 100% of the focus being on the cue that they're trying to implement to improve their swing, to now it's okay, maybe 50% focused on that, but at some point in that course of the swing or whatever movement they're doing, part of it is focused on getting the result that they want to. So I've heard you talk about, if you want to hit a draw, you got your target line and you got your start line, and then drawing it back to where it doesn't cross over the target line. So if you hit 5 shots, then you're like, okay, I've got to get at least 3 that with the result I want to. So part of your brain is focused on that, and part is still focused on the positioning of the movement. Is that along the line, or is that off base?
No, it's on base, but let me peel the layer back on that a little bit. So when we're thinking about a change, or if we're trying to make that change in the very beginning, imagine your brain is sending a firework of directions. You're just, you're like randomly, you're saying, I need to do this. I don't know how. I'm just going to send the message out, via these neurons. These neurons are going to be flying down through our spine, down in the CNS, the central nervous system, spine, out into the muscle spindles and the motor neurons. And whether we reached the right place to get the output we want probably is dependent on how hard the motion is to make, how athletic the person is, and how good that thought was. It could be a confusing thought. So it could take some time before that signal gets to the right place and you get the right output. Right? Like you have to kind of, everybody's different. You have to figure out, well, if somebody really understands the wrist and they're like, okay, I totally get that idea that I want to put a ruler on the back of my hand and have it match up with my forearm. Okay, but I actually can't feel it. All right. So now we might have to put that ruler there so you can truly feel that congruent feedback. There's lots of good stuff. Martin Chuck has all kinds of fun stuff, and George has fun stuff. George Gankis. So there's things that you can do to really feel it, but those are great in the beginning when you're like, I have no idea what that's supposed to feel like. Aha, now I do. Okay, so great. So now take the thing off and let's see if your body can produce that same feeling without the feedback forcing you to do it. So as you're going through your repetitions, as you're going through practice, that's when the neural pruning starts to happen. This is one of these theories that the pruning is, instead of sending a whole fireworks of information, all these neurons or these synapses are going all over the place. It will start to dial into a more narrow, more specific direction. Just like, if you don't know, this was my thesis advisor at Columbia had this example and I loved it. It was back when there were phone books. Does anybody remember phone books who's listening? Those are these things where everybody's phone number in a city would be in a big book. Well, if I don't know the number to somebody and I just start randomly dialing the phone all over the place to random numbers, I'm going to get the wrong number, but maybe once I'm going to get the right number. Well, it's costly, energy heavy to use that process in our prefrontal cortex, that our brain, once it starts to get the right number, it starts to get the right motion, you start to figure out what it feels like. It doesn't want to keep sending those wasted signals because it's just inefficient. So our brains will start to say, okay, that's not the right way. That's not the right way. That's not the right way. But if you don't have any way to know whether it's not the right way, like if you're just sitting on the range and you're getting that wrist into extension every time, and you hit a good one here and there, you're just getting lucky. You haven't made a change.
Mm-hmm.
So So you have to figure out, that's where training aids come in real handy. So figure out what training aids you need to get that feel, and use that training aid until you can do it on your own. And then that's when that neural pruning happens, when you start to have some automaticity. You don't have to think about it as much, and you can find it and it feels familiar. Think of it as a memory. Now that memory is only going to be as strong as you make it by doing it. So whatever we've done early in our childhood, those typically are the strongest patterns and habits that we have. So to override that, like, you can't break an old one, but you can override it. You have to put so much time into it that that's the new default, most familiar go-to under pressure. And that just takes a lot of time and a lot of specific practice to make sure that you really know it, and you know it well enough that you can trust it under pressure.
Yeah, as far as the neural development, that a lot of people, I don't think, understand, as you just described, that it becomes, you can override an old pattern, and that as I thought that was a great way to explain it, that there's a fireworks of neural activity going on, and it starts to streamline it to the point that the neural pathway is built like, I tell people, like a road. As you build from two different directions, the road eventually connects, and once that connection happens, I mean, that's when that gotcha moment where you hit the shot that you want to, and then something, you just go up and you do it again. And now it just gets reinforced stronger and stronger. Where up until that point, it's kind of skipping. It doesn't know, it's like a old, talk about things that are old, the phone books. How about, like a record that skips because it had a scratch in it?
Yeah.
Half the people out there listening probably don't even know what the hell we're talking about, a scratchy record, but
Totally. There's a button for that now. You just, that scratch sound.
So it's to go back to the typing deal. It is, someone can use where they're hitting one letter, but eventually that it has to be incorporated into utilizing it from one letter to another letter, to an integration of all letters, and that would be learning a particular move at the range, or even in your own house, to where there's no ball, there's no nothing, and you can focus specifically on that. Let's use that as the baseline. And then you would eventually get it to the range where there is going to be a result that's going to impact you negatively or positively. And then it's taking it to the golf course, and then it's incorporating the course and the range practice until it is ultimately at the golf course.
Yeah, you got it.
Is that a good summary?
Yeah, you got it, Pete. You're good.
And in doing some homework on you, the one term that came up was, I believe, was the challenge point. Mm-hmm. Is that? Can you describe that a little bit? Because I have used that, not that word or terminology, but I have told students that when they're learning something, obviously the shorter the club, they usually make the adaptation sooner, and that there will be I call it a tipping point, usually somewhere in the mid-iron, where they're not able to hit at least 50% of their shots the way they want to, but they'll have to work up to that, like it's slowly, like a wave. But can you describe for all those listening or watching what the challenge point is? Because I think that's an integral part of the next step of that process.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So the challenge point framework was a paper that was written in, I think, 2007 by Mark Guadagnoli. Dr. Guadagnoli is a professor at UNLV, and Tim Lee, who is a friend of mine who is also a professor. He's at McGill. And these two basically looked at the compilation of research on learning and performance and put together a summary, calling it a framework, creating a framework that they called the challenge point. And the summary essentially said this, that when you take a particular task, let's call the task, it may be, there's a nominal difficulty and there's a functional difficulty. So the nominal difficulty is how difficult that particular task is. So to use your example, nominal difficulty of an iron is easier than a longer club like a fairway wood. So it's easier to hit it's just easier to hit one shot than it is another shot. So that would be the functional difficulty. The nominal difficulty. Functional difficulty is how hard that is for each person. So if you plug a tour player in, they're both fairly easy. But if you plug a beginner or like a 20 handicap, the functional difficulty of an iron is going to be easier than the fairway wood. I mean, we're generalizing here, but I think the idea. Another way of saying this was the example that they used in the paper, was just crumpling up a piece of garbage, throwing it into a garbage basket next to your desk. So that would be very easy for LeBron James. So the functional difficulty would be very easy. The functional difficulty for my 5-year-old would be very hard. But the actual difficulty of doing that, it is what it is. It has a certain set of requirements, and that's what you need to do you need to get the arc right and the speed right and releasing your hands at the right time and so forth. So like the set of directions of how to do that is not going to change, but it may be easier or hard for someone. Okay, so let's take that then and move to the next stage of this paper. That is, you want to give an opportunity for a learner to be challenged so that they are not overwhelmed, because that will actually retard learning, and they're not underwhelmed because then they won't be learning anything. So if you're asking LeBron James to hit the basket from 5 feet each time, he's probably not going to be challenged that much. But for the kids who've never really thrown anything in a basket, they might be challenged. So that's a good place to stay. So you want to put yourself, if you're practicing, into a place where you have to be uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable or not so in the dark that you don't know why you made the errors that you made, or you're getting frustrated with yourself and you're not learning. Right.
A lot of literature on that I'd read many years ago. My aunt was a child psychologist. She had a doctorate in it and worked with B.F. Skinner. And then I had read a lot of Howard Gardner's book.
Yeah.
So the way that people differentiate in their learning style.
Well-known guy.
And then many years ago when I got into training and started reading the literature on that more so than what I did on the golf, but I was seeing if there was a correlation between the two, and the training world's dealing with muscular adaptation and things like that. That literature spoke to, if you're, you got into chronological age versus training age and all those, and biological age. There was a differential between the two, and one of the criteria of measuring, as we now measure functionality of the body, was determine what level somebody is in each of those before you start prescribing exercises. But as I got along in that, it was, if somebody is relatively new, or in this case, we use an 18 handicap, where they're playing twice a month, the prescription for change would be less time doing it per session, but more often. And then as somebody developed, they would do it more intense for longer periods of time, but greater length of time between times that they did it. Is that similar when it comes to motor learning? That if somebody's new at something, that they're going to do it more often for shorter durations? Let's say 20 minutes or 30 minutes at the range to work on it 3 times a week.
Oh, I see.
And if somebody's much stronger at it.
Yeah, that would make sense if consuming information and processing, like there's a heavy cognitive load early in learning, let's say, in particular with the golf swing, the mechanics of a golf swing are really complex. It's a highly complex activity. It's not like throwing a dart. Sorry, every dart thrower who's out. What's easier than that? I'm sure there's easier, but you get my point. My point is swinging clubs. So I think from the perspective of keeping things challenging, but not over challenging, sure. Yeah. Give somebody shorter periods of time, but space. In other words, don't give them massed practice where they do a 3-hour block once a week. Give them 20 minutes, 10 minutes a day for the whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the neuroplasticity is not going to support it. They're going to hit a wall where it's not being absorbed. Now they're floating into where it's not being beneficial, and now they're getting muscular endurance issue, and everything crumbles to where.
Yep.
Right.
So I think there's lots of research out there too that's supporting that. And I'm not up on all the recent, but I do know that there is absolutely no value in overtraining if somebody is getting tired, if they're losing focus, if they're not absorbing, and that can often happen early in learning for sure. So
yeah, because I see that with some of the higher handicaps I teach, as we noted earlier, that towards the end or latter part of the lesson, that they will have done it what we want. They'll get to level, and they're repeating it more often than they aren't. Or they're getting to at least, I like to use a 50% mark. If they can get it 50%, that's kind of the goal. And then hopefully they can pass that. But as they get later in the lesson, they're physically fit, but they're starting, their timing
Exhausted.
and sequencing starts to fall
They're,
off. And I'm like, you're getting tired. And they're, no, I can hit balls all day.
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but it's not registering up here, which means something's not
Yeah.
working how we want to. So stop.
This is why I think if you're going to go to a golf school, I get the question probably once a month. Someone asks, where should I send my mom to a golf school, or I want to go to a golf school with my sister or whatever, or my brother. What's a good beginner golf school, or what's a good golf school? My answer is usually go to a golf school that can handle beginners, because I get very scared. Even, I was training at a golf school. I was teaching at a golf school. I understand how they work. And Jim McLean was brilliant with groups. With beginners, it's a whole different type of information dose. It's a slower dose. So I think you have to make sure that somebody understands not to give you too much too fast if you're a beginner, and a good coach is going to know how to do that. But,
That's why I stopped doing 5-day schools many years ago. That people, we want you to do this. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'll break it up. If they want to pay for 5 days, I'll give them a 3-day school now, which is going to bombard them, and they're going to be worn out mentally and physically. But they can come back in X amount of weeks, and we'll do the other 2 days. But I'm not doing 5. It's just, it doesn't do them any good, and it's not going to do me any good, because they're going to leave and they're going to say, well, we liked it, but we didn't get better.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And the experts, on the other hand, are better at training longer, and they can take in more information, or they don't even need as much information, but they can focus on the task for longer. And particularly in golf, when it's a 4-hour game, hopefully 4, that's part of the stamina. Focusing and working on something requires being able to kind of take it in.
All right, let's jump out of the brain scientific world for a minute. Let's jump into the playing and the golf industry as a whole. Then, as we talked about in the pre-show, the National Golf Foundation, the emphasis and the increase has been on women's golfers, and there's been arguably a 25% increase in the women participation in golf. In your opinion, as someone who works, I mean, you're obviously a lady, and I'm sure a lot of ladies come to you for advice and so on, probably more so than me. You just go to who you feel comfortable with, I would assume. Somebody might ridicule me on social media for saying that, but
I don't know how. I don't know what you just said.
In the grander scheme of things. Any idea as to why the growth for women in golf in the last couple of years?
I have some guesses. I'm not familiar with the exact. I mean, I know Boston Consulting Group did a study for the PGA over 5 years. They did a long study on that. If I'm just shooting from the hip here, I think COVID certainly had an impact, because people were at home and they had more time. They wanted to get out of the house. Golf was maybe they're near a golf course. Their spouse is already playing, and they want to be with their spouse. I mean, there's all kinds of things that kind of came out of COVID. People realized they wanted to have more time on their own. They wanted to get away. They wanted to be with. I mean, who knows what it was, but it kind of got people out of the woodwork. And golf was a safe place to do that. So I think that was great. Now, prior to COVID, women were the fastest to join as well, but they were also the fastest to quit. So I think the question now among many, many of us in the industry is, how do we keep people here? How do we keep the women here that are already here? How do we keep them liking the game, because they've tried it before and they've left because it's too hard, it takes too long, they didn't have a good experience with their coach, or they didn't have experience on the golf course. So more so than ever, the industry professionals like us and GMs and golf course owners are coming up with ways to make it more friendly for women, and ways to make women feel more connected to the pros, and feel like that they kind of belong on the golf course. Whereas I think maybe 10 years ago, a woman had to feel pretty confident, or she had to have the right person with her holding her hand to say, hey, this is what you do. Don't put your shoes on that way. Put it this way. Don't carry your bag that way. Carry it this way. And all those little things, when you add up, can either create a stressful experience or a comfortable and fun experience. So we're now in a better place to handle all that. I think social media certainly helped. Well, I mean, all the girls in bikinis, all the girls in bikinis I don't know have held. I think we're in a place that we haven't been in a long time. Well, I think we're in a place that we have never been in, actually, where there are more women who are in positions with visibility and voices that can be seen by other women and girls. So, for instance, I'm thinking of 5 or 6 different accounts that are on Instagram that are women golfing groups that are taking trips, and they're saying, hey, come on out. This is fun. Look at all this fun stuff. We're going to show you the cool things you can wear, but we're also going to show you how much fun it is to play golf with other women. And there's all these little peripheral things that you can do to make it fun. So, I think we're going to see some of those numbers stick. That's what I'm hoping. And there was another number that came out of that Golf Federation study, and that was the amount of juniors. I think 36% jump in junior growth, and
Wow.
and way more girls. So that's also a good thing to hear, that the youngest ones are also female, and they're finding that it's also really fun and welcoming.
Yeah, I know Krista Dunton and Dr. Jean Harris here locally. They do a lot of work with having clinics and girls and getting them introduced to golf and in an environment that says, hey, it's okay, come on out. We know it can be a scary thing. As a kid, you're 6 to 12 years old, or whatever age, and doing things where you're uncomfortable can be a very daunting experience. And if you don't enjoy it, then you're not going to want to continue. And I think they've done a great job in growing I don't know what the name of it is, the Junior Girls League. I can't remember, but that's awesome that there's more involved. I know a number of my friends who have daughters that they've gotten them into golf early instead of maybe soccer or basketball or something like that. And they're in the Northern Hemisphere, and they're really getting good. And I think the proliferation of things like Operation 36 and PGA Junior League and all these things that open up avenues to allow kids to be kids, all the boys and the girls together, and it's based off a skill level. It's not based off gender. Where, when I was a kid, most things were based off of, boys did their thing and girls did their thing. So yeah, it's a lot of good things happening that's just going to make the game grow as a whole, as opposed to siphoning everybody off and then saying, well, geez, why didn't this group grow as fast as this
Yeah,
one?
that's right. And we also have more equipment. We've got equipment. US Kids, I love that company. They make everything they make it in a yellow or a pink or a red. So you've got different colors you can choose from, instead of just, traditionally thought of as boy colors. So that's great. And there's tournaments that have a girls division, and girls are participating. So there's just a lot more out there, I think, that it has been established, like you said, and is ready to welcome everybody.
Is somebody who growing up, you played golf, but your path didn't move into the golfing coaching world in particular until you were out of school, and then. But the coaching industry and golf in general is a very male dominated industry. Did you just have your mindset on what you wanted to achieve and accomplish, and that really didn't even factor into your decision, or was there some hurdles along the way that you as a female felt that you had to overcome to get to the positions that you wanted to?
Well, this answer will just be a very personal answer, and you'll get to know me as a person. I didn't think so much about the industry as being all male and wanting to be there because I was a female. It was more like I never had any female mentors or anyone to look up to when I was a girl in golf. And I thought, well, that would be cool to be the person I didn't have. So to that extent, it did occur to me. But I think there was a good chunk of time in the beginning where I wasn't really even cognizant of being the only female in the room, and right until there were times where there was like 300 guys in blue blazers, and I was the only female. And I'd be like, wow, I am the only. There are times like that. I'm like, whoa, there really are not a lot of women here. But generally speaking, I was just. In the beginning, I had lots of little run-ins. I I still do have run-ins, where it's pretty clear, like in the beginning, it was pretty clear that I would be put in the shop because, you're going to be in the shop and you'll fold clothes. Now, I don't want to feel like it was thrown on me, like, okay, well, the guys had to do that too. So it wasn't just me. But in order for me to be taken seriously as a teacher, I knew I needed to get a lot of the same credentials that the guys had. So there was a point where I'm like, okay, I have my PJ membership. I'm also going to do my LPJ membership. And okay, I'm gonna go to this club fitting seminar, and I'm gonna go to this 3-day conference on this. I'm gonna go. So I ended up going to a lot of things because I was really interested in just growing and learning. And as a result, I kind of ended up with just as much, on paper as some of the people that I really admired. And I thought, okay, great, but I still didn't. I mean, as a female, you still don't always get the benefit of the doubt. So I don't know. It's sort of an uncomfortable conversation because I don't like to make big sweeping gender stereotypes. But I am aware that the playing field's not always level, and I'm just trying to do my best to be the best teacher I can. And I happen to be a female, and that's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have reached the success that you have that had anything else in mind except the thing that you shared when you were the one. You're surrounded by blue blazers at a educational seminar, and there's, like you said, there's 300 blue blazers, and there's you. That the common denominator on why everybody was there, or for the overwhelming majority of it, was you're there to learn something, become better at a specific skill. As we were talking about, skill in the golf swing, you're there to learn the skill of instruction and coaching and anything else that club fitting and fill in the blank. So that was a common denominator that drew everybody there, and whether it's 1 to 300 or 50 to 50 or, whatever numbers it is, so long as that's the common denominator, that's a very good thing. I think that as you now are a role model for more young girls, and as we said, with all the junior programs and equipment companies, that there's more avenues for young girls to get in. And now they have someone like you to look up to, like Susie Whaley. They can, she's the president of the PGA, the first female, and all these other women who are doing these wonderful things, that it's going to continue to grow. I think it's not going to be a barrier. It's like, well, that's all guys that are doing that, and maybe I'll go do something else because I won't feel comfortable.
That's right. That's right. That's right. If and I'm not the first one, certainly there are plenty of women that have been out there doing some great things. I think tons, and I'm grateful to all of them who truly were the first to do A, B, and C. But I think the more, like you said, the more that we're just part of the conversation and we're at the same table, not segregating ourselves to just talking to each other as women in leadership, that we're at the same table with everybody else. I think that'll continue to grow, and the respect and the more the women are bringing real issues and real solutions and real value to the challenges that we face as an industry, or the discussion on a national level of how to solve particular areas. I think that the more respect is just inherently going to grow, and that's how this whole game is going to work.
Well, you're right. The different perspective is enormous, because what I think that the study showed that it's the wife or the mom or whoever it is within the family structure that makes the large determination on the budget of the family. And if kids are going to play golf, if the mom is comfortable with taking the kids to whatever is the local junior PGA league or whatever program they're going to be entered in, if she thinks that it's good for her kids, then the kids are going to go. Of course, some will go kicking and screaming. And even to go back to Sebastian Junger and his books and his writings, I believe that in some older cultures, more getting hundreds of years back, that obviously the men would be the ones that would go do the fighting back then, but it would ultimately be the council of women within that tribe or that organization that would make the determination if the colony or the group was going to go to war.
Interesting.
So having the perspective of a woman's perspective or the female side, and not just so lopsided one way, I mean, the history is littered with examples of you need both. You need both to do a lot of things, and that's one of them. What what is it that as we look at it, the female perspective, what is it from a female perspective that makes them so good at teaching both sexes? Because obviously you have a lot of students, you're very successful. You're not just teaching women, you're teaching men as well. What is it that you are able to do that makes you be able to teach both and everybody, kids, older demographic, younger men, women, teenagers, college, pro, everything? Is there something there, or is it just that it goes back to developing skills, motor learning, club fitting, swing mechanics,
Oh, I don't
and
like to,
becoming more educated?
I don't like saying, well, I'm a female and I'm born to be more nurturing, so I'm going to be more nurturing. Um, I I think there are a lot of really good coaches that are males that can teach men and women really well too. So I don't want to put myself in a corner by saying, by answering that directly, because I don't know that there's an answer that women can do. I will say, just from one anecdotal, my own experience is, I'm an outgoing person and I like people, and I really like hearing what people have to say, and I like the energy that people bring, and I like the interaction. I get energy from those interactions. So I'm not sure if that's me as a female or if that's me as just an outgoing extrovert, liking people. So I do a lot of listening, and I do and I have a lot of empathy, and I can, like, if you start crying, I'll start crying. It happens.
Hopefully I won't do that.
I cry. I cry. My husband makes fun of me. I mean, I'll cry at something that's not even meant to be sad, but thinking it might be hard for somebody else. So I think those are the qualities that give a little bit of um, extra to helping people feel good about themselves, and to feel like they can do it, and they've got some efficacy in whatever skill we're trying to establish. It certainly helps that I have a really clear ability to create taxonomies of simple to complex. So if somebody is feeling overwhelmed, I can dial that down really well, and I've got lots of tools to do that, of how to make someone, how to reduce the pressure and give somebody an opportunity to kind of relax a little bit, and then build it up, and in a way that they are comfortable with and they understand, but they also feel like they're getting something out of it. So I guess the answer is, it's probably a combination of a few skills. Some of it's the people skills, and some of it's just the tactical skills as a coach and a teacher.
Yeah, that's what I would thought. That was a question that was submitted, and as I was reading it, I said, well, my opinion would be it's you develop certain skills. You have certain, whether it's learned, as you have learned, the motor learning and the biomechanicals and the structural of the swing, the mechanics, but it's also the personal skill on someone's ability to be able to interpret what's happening, yet explain it in a way that the person can understand, to make them better. And I don't think gender has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, yeah.
We'll push that one aside. Is there anything that as you got into this profession, is there anything that you wish you could go back and tell Trillium back then, to say, I highly recommend you do this? So much
stuff. I mean, can we do another podcast on that? I mean, heck.
Or let me rephrase that. What would be the one thing that if you get a time machine and go back and pull the young Trillium aside and say, hey, make sure of all the things that you're going to come across, I can't recommend enough that you make sure to do this. Is there anything that would be, or that you should know this going forward?
I think, a lot of things that I did, I think I got lucky with. Like, I got lucky that I happen to like people, and I don't burn very many bridges. I think, knowing that going forward, I see all these other people who have really defiant ways of going about things, and like they're like rubbing elbows hard with people, and I that's just not my way. And I think I didn't go into that intentionally, but wow, if I had to do it again, I would say right off the bat, you just don't know what you're going to learn from somebody and what someone's going to bring to the table. And just because you may have had some kind of awkward interaction, or someone didn't say something that was very nice to you, leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Let it go. Don't take things personally. So I think I probably took things personally too many times. And I'm around a lot of guys. Guys do a really good job of bouncing back. So maybe I have you to thank for that instead of like getting down on something when I had a door slammed in my face, it's just, you know what, whatever, let's try tomorrow. I think pushing forward, and, I did my undergraduate degree, and then in media studies in Los Angeles. I thought I was going to be a producer. I was like, and photography. I was into movies and film and still photography. That ended up being useful later on, but at the time, my trajectory was, one way, and then 180 degrees later, I ended up in golf. So I really had to start from scratch when it comes to like really learning the industry of teaching and how to teach and how to do all of that. I think if I could do something differently, would I have wanted to close the gap and like there were 10 years from the time I went to grad school to undergrad. That's a long time. But at the same time, I had to go back and take the GRE. It took me a year to study for the GRE. That's a year of studying for class.
That's some serious dedication.
It seriously was. I did the Kaplan, and it's expensive, and you still don't even know, if you're going to use that stuff again. Anyway, I'm glad and grateful I did a lot of things the way I did. I think paring down, like, what am I going to tell my daughter? What could I have done? I probably would have been a little less well-rounded growing up and a little more focused on one or two, either sports or things. I thought well-rounded meant balanced, and balanced was good. Well, I took a swing in the other direction when I graduated college, and I just went completely singularly in one direction. And I just cut out a lot of stuff. I cut out a lot of friends, and I cut out a lot of social time, and I cut out a lot of extracurriculars, and I just went crazy because on golf, like no vacations. I may have worked so hard. And part of that was because I felt excited to learn it. And part of it was because, like, oh my gosh, you're 22, and I had pro tell me I was too late to become a teacher. Like I was too old. The ship had sailed, right? That was probably the best thing he could have said. Because we said that basically turned the fire on. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, really?
Watch. Let me show you.
Thanks for that, buddy. So, well-rounded is I think healthy, but I went through this unwell-rounded phase that was it was like 15 years of not being well-rounded. And finally, I think I'm back.
But yeah, it seems to go in cycles. I mean, it is, when I was playing, putting was my Achilles heel. I mean, guys would show up at the first tee and say, we've heard the rumors. I mean, it got to the point I was averaging 6 lip outs a round, and they're like, we don't believe it. I mean, and I'm missing cuts by like 1 and 2 shots, or missing Mondays by a shot or two. And then you got a 500-mile drive to the next event or wherever I'm going. That's a long drive when you just missed your fifth event by one shot, and you're lipping out on average 6 times around. So guys would show up and if we don't believe, there's no way that you can do that. And at the end of the round, like, I never would have guessed it. So yeah, what I'm getting at is I went, my understanding of neurological development and processes and pruning and all that came out of when I was done playing. I said, no, this isn't going to beat me. I am going to find the answer on how to become a better putter. And now if I knew then what I know now, I might be playing somewhere on TV still, but I'm not. But what I'm getting at is I got tagged as being extremely analytical. In my entire life, I was not ever analytical. It was always as you mentioned, let me do a bunch of different things. I like variety. I like interesting things. And then I went for about 5 to 6 years into a very analytical stage. And then the critique on me as far as teaching was, well, he's too analytical. And then now it's come full circle. But now that I incorporated the analytical that I had to learn into the more free flowing, I guess you could call it. But I know the analytical, and you know yours obviously extremely well. But you also, you don't use the technical terms all the time when you're giving it to somebody. You know, you're not telling someone, well, get your arm more external, Mr. or Mrs. Havacamp, when they're looking at you like, what the hell are you talking about? So it's good to know it for when you need it. And it's good to know it because you can make it extremely simple for somebody, and you know that this is what they need. And then they get the results and they're happy as well. So I don't know if there was a question there or not. I guess I just went on a rant.
I call it the mobility class, golf mobility. It's in the off season. I'm in Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, and it's cold in the winter. So there's not a lot of golf. So I created this, I kind of made it up as I went along, a class that I did inside in the yoga studio. So there's mirrors. And then I cut down a bunch of clubs that were in the donation pile, and I slapped on some molded grips. So the club's about 3 feet long. So you can have a club in your hand, but you're not going to hit anything. But you just have the experience of having the implement, but with that. So I thought, all right, let's do a class where we can we'll work on the mobility and stability issues that people might have, and we'll kind of go through a golf swing, and it'll be like 30% of a golf swing discussion, and then let's say 60% exercises and like another 10% of stretches or something. Well, it turned into, and that was great. So we were doing lots of planks, we're doing lots of exercises and motions for golf, but without actually doing the swing. People liked it. But what they loved was that 30% golf swing. You know, we're actually doing the golf swing. So it's turned into 95% golf swing. And what I've realized is doing the golf, like setting somebody up in posture and really engaging the correct muscles to get there, and understanding where a neutral spine is, and understanding how to affect motion in a pelvis without working any motion or turning your upper body, like stabilizing one action, moving another, finding those body parts. That was exercise in and of itself. And it's actually like a power boost of IQ into someone's understanding of what they should be trying to do and think and feel, and how the swing works. So it's heavy on kinematic sequence. In fact, heavy on everything. So the 12 people that I had this, like last week, for example, I had the same people keep coming back. It's usually people that don't need it the most that are there. Which is so crazy. Like I had a girl, she came in, she'd never played golf, a woman, never played golf before. And she's like, hey, I want to do this class. Do you think so? But I've never played. I said, sure, why not? She built her swing from this class. This woman just leapfrogged over all these other potential bad habits because she understood, right, how to generate force from the ground, and how to feel like your pelvis is really working, initiating that downswing first, pulling the torso, feeling where the club is in her wrist at the top, feeling how that trail arm feels if the club's like a little behind the hands. Like, so it's super, 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 super technical, but there's no ball to hit. And this is and you're not going to go play tomorrow. You're not even going to play next month. So this was a great way. So, I guess I wish I had done this earlier. I wish I had done more of this earlier. And I still need to do more of it during the summer. People just don't think that they need it, and they don't really want to do it. But I've just seen so many more gains from people doing these courses than they can when they're paying me, $200 something an hour. Like, this is a $20 class. And you could get more out of this than the hourly with me sometimes.
Do you think that's a cultural thing in the U.S.? Because I had to do that. I was not allowed, per the experts, to swing a club for about I didn't touch a club for 2 years, outside of maybe holding it and showing somebody during a lesson. But I didn't play. I didn't go on a golf course, anything. But once my back started to get better, I had, as you mentioned, it's almost a kids club that I would swing. I call them phantom or ghost swings in the living room for almost a year to year and a half, and just would check. Am I here? Nope, I'm not. It's okay. Let me go back to it. So and then when I went back to play, my swing had completely changed, and that it was so much better. Now, was it 100%? No, I'm not saying it was, but I ask if it's a cultural thing, because if you look at how the Chinese and the Koreans train for Olympic sport, that the kids will start with a very basic, if they're going to do clean and snatch, or they're going to do squat or deadlift, that they're training with like a PVC pipe or a dowel rod until they have the exact perfect form. And from what I've seen and talked to people and read about, is they're using that same philosophy in the training them in golf, so that they're working on, without a ball, they're working on, here's how you need to do it. Here's how you need to develop it. And once they develop it, okay, now we can progress to this stage, so that by the time they're actually on a course and hitting a ball, that it's like the dopamine hit, where they see just enough, as you described earlier, to keep them interested, and they want to go get that carrot.
I'm convinced that is the best way to learn, having done it with people and seen people do this, and having seen how quickly people improve their swing from this class. I'm convinced. What I am not convinced on is people's appetite and willingness to do it. Did you grow up in the U.S.?
No.
So
yes.
How was it that you didn't
grew up
swing?
In Michigan.
You said that. How was it that you didn't swing a club for 2 years?
Well, I live in the Hilton Head area, so I could play. It's one of the reasons I got sick of shoveling snow and minus temperatures. But I had, you're with Titleist and TPI, so I was working with Dan Hellman quite a bit. So when my back really had given me issues, and Dan said, okay, you're not touching it. You're not going to play golf. I know it's not going to be easy, but we're taking you off of swinging.
Dan is great.
For
Dan is
a
great.
while.
I went to Dan.
Yes. He's been on twice. I went to Dan
when I lived in Miami, and he was in Fort Lauderdale, and I went. He is really good. I really respect him. But I don't think people have the app. People want to see the ball, and they want to see and oftentimes people just want to kind of do with what they have. I mean, I can think of so many examples of someone who's just sitting there rapid fire hitting balls, and I'm looking, and they're like, "Oh no, normally I can hit it. And I'm like, okay.
Like, wait, let me do this.
Watch. What do you really want? Do you want to keep making those mistakes, or you just want to solve it on your own and continue with the move that you have, which could work, but you're going to have to put a lot of work. You're going to have to put a lot of time into that, because there's so many moving parts and it's so inefficient. So I would argue that you're going to get lucky, and then you're going to get really good at a movement. Hopefully that doesn't have kind of an inherently bad thing for your body. And is this the most efficient way to go? Are you going to max out with certain distances and come back to me in 2 years and say you want to hit it farther? And I'm like, okay, well, I have to freaking start all over, which we should have done 2 years ago. You're going
to have to unwind all that.
Yeah, you're like
shit
throwing
that
it from the top when you really have no use of your legs. So like that's that kind of thing that I'm like, I don't know. I can see a faster way. And if you want that faster way, I'm here for you. And hopefully those are the students that tend to go to me in the first place, so that we can actually get better. Because it's really fun seeing people improve. It's not fun working with people that don't want to work.
I could, once, as you said, you started that this year or last year?
Actually, I started this about 5 years ago.
Okay. I would have to imagine that as others within the club start to see that these students who you're working with who aren't even going on the golf course for a while, and all of a sudden they're leapfrogging them and saying, hey, wait a second, I'm working my butt off for the last 3 years on the range 4 times a week, and this person isn't, and all of a sudden they're beating me.
Yeah. I did have one guy, instead of doing an hour lesson, he books 2, and he wants to do the private mobility class. So we do an hour in the yoga studio with him, just doing this, and then we go into the golf course. It's such a no-brainer. If you're trying to ask your body to move a certain way, why don't you work on moving your body a certain way so you can get better at that and feel it, and then introduce the club and the ball and the hit and the strike, right?
I think it was your mentor, Jim McLean, that I first read about that, where the best way to practice, and this had to be roughly 20 years ago.
Maybe longer.
At least. It might have been closer to 30. That he said, if you're really dedicated to getting good, go work, no ball, no nothing, even slow motion if you have to. Make sure that you really dial in what you're working on. Then once you can do that, then take it to full swings. Or I don't remember the exact progression, but I do remember that it was, hey, you got to start here if you're really
That's
serious about getting
exactly
better.
right. I think he called it the elimination theory. Like if you can't do it on the golf course, take away the course. If you can't do it on the range, take away the the ball or hit into a net, and then take away the club, and then just like
Mhm.
work it down to its most primary move.
That was it. You start
Yeah,
without a club, and then you go to a club,
yeah,
and then you go to hitting a ball without a result, and then you go to hitting it with a result, and then you go to the golf. I think it
yeah.
was a 5-step. He's always got
I
his
love the
steps
steps.
programs.
I love the steps. And
He's
Jim gets a lot of heat for being mechanical, but I gotta tell you something, the guy has just been so successful because he's got a system that's really open to a lot of different swing, styles and personalities within one swing, technically. So, I mean, I really respect that. It's not a mold. It's not you got to do this and that. It's like, how are you going to get someone better? And that has to be pretty flexible.
I was supposed when I got out of school, I went to Ferris State in their golf program. When I got out, I was working that summer at the course I grew up at, and the pro and Jim were friends. They played the tour for a while together, and I didn't even realize it was October in Michigan, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, in a couple more weeks it's going to be snowing. What am I going to do for the winter? And so I had interned in Hilton Head, so I called some friends here, and Randy had called down to Jim. This would have been in '95, winter in '95, and we were waiting to hear back, and Hilton Head just happened to call first, so I moved back here instead of moving to Route. Because I think he called Randy back about a week later and said, hey, if he wants to come down, you got a spot for him here. And I'd already committed to Hilton Head, so that's how I got back here and not
Cool.
to Florida.
Cool story.
Is there anything that with that either anecdotal, your experience, your education, that you would firmly believe in, that some of the contemporaries say that you got to be out of your mind for believing in that? Is there any theory that you have or you've been working on that might be a little outside the box, but you're seeing it work and you're looking at pursuing it?
I love that question. You put me on the spot. I have my note. I don't have my notebook with me. I wish I could go to my notes and I could just succinctly give you a few things. The hit list on this would be we're trying to train people and we're trying to train ourselves to make a change in feel. So ultimately, feel is what we're after, and you've got to figure out a way to do that where you can feel the difference between the old way and the new way, the right way or the wrong way. And if you can't feel the difference and you can't parse that out, you figure out a way that you can, because you can't get better unless you start with that step. I think training aids are really good if they're used the right way, and there are training aids that you can use the wrong way. So you don't want to become dependent on them, and you don't want to have to rely on a training aid in order to play better. So be able to do it on your own. I am a fan of both blocked and random practice.
Me too.
Yep.
Guilty.
I think this game is hard enough. So Scott Fawcett and I agree on a lot of things, and that having one shot shape is hard enough under pressure. So know what that bread and butter shot shape is and play that note hard if you need to. So it's cool to be able to curve the ball right and left, but ultimately you got to have something to fall back on that you know is there. So I appreciate that. Now that doesn't necessarily mean hitting that same shot over and over and over on a driving range. That just may mean know your shot pattern and stick with it. So, I think when people are arguing about blocked versus random, they're not really understanding too that this game is hard enough. And even when I'm making a change on a 7-iron and I'm hitting my 7-iron to the same target, I may be doing random practice, even though it looks like blocked practice, because it's so dang hard to get that repeatability. Like that could be random practice, because on one I'm relaxing my right leg, and on the next one I'm going to be engaging my right leg, right? But you can't see that, but I can feel it. So I think if the going gets easy and you're hitting and you're not thinking at all and you're just whipping shots out mindlessly and you're talking to the buddy next to you, okay, maybe it's time to move on to a different club. Maybe it's time to change things up. But if you're having a hard enough time keeping your dispersion into a narrow little like 10-yard, 20-yard, 30-yard fairway there, then stick with it until you can get it there.
That's very, very good. And many people listening should heed that advice. And if they have a friend that needs to hear it, they can send it to them and replay it, because that is very, very good advice. You have a few minutes left. We could do I call it the emergency 9, just 9 goofy random questions. So I tell everybody the first one and the last one everybody gets to keep some kind of structure, but everything in between and they're just at random things that I've heard or people said, ask this and so on. So, well, the first one is, if you were in the Ryder Cup or a Ryder Cup style format at a member guest or at any tournament, your walk-up song, what's your walk-up song going to be?
Oh, man. The first one comes to mind is Black Betty. Oh, Black Betty. Oh, Black Betty.
That would get people going. That get them riled up. Let's see. Best describes you. You love to win or you hate to lose?
Oh, I love to win.
That didn't take very long.
Oh. I mean, losing's part of it. I know that is. Losing's part of it. And losing motivates me to work harder to win. So I don't mind making mistakes. Nobody should be afraid of making mistakes. Like I
should have known that answer, because I was listening to you on, I forget what podcast it was, but someone said were you used to enter some things just in the lower division just so you could zoom past somebody. And it's like, wow, she really likes to win. So I should have known that before I asked that
really
question.
Funny. That's right. It was in running races, so I would sign up in a slower heat so I could just run past people.
That was I laughed when I heard you say that. That was very, very funny. The most famous person in your phone, which I thought was going to be an interesting one for you, given where you live, because my brother is very good friends with Bernie. So I have an idea of that area and who lives around that DC, Baltimore area, who plays around there. So, and knowing that you went to school in LA, I thought, wow, this is going to be I'm curious to hear her answer on this one. So the most famous person in your phone.
I'm not.
If you're allowed to say.
I'm allowed to say. Bill Murray.
Okay. Very cool. That in the golf world, that's about as cool as you can get.
He's really an intelligent human being. He is really smart. He's fun too. He's fun, and you have to be smart, I think, to be funny. And I think he's such a big, recognizable name. I mean, the younger kids, not so much, but I think anybody that's over a certain age just knows exactly who he is.
Yeah.
He's funny in ways like that if you're looking at him and you're awestruck, you're not going to pick up on some of the stuff that he says. His timing is incredible too.
Let's see. Favorite video game? I had to throw a little bit of a curve in there that's a simple, but after we sitting there talking about motor learning and neural processes, okay, how about a simple?
Does Wordle
video
count?
game?
Okay.
Sure. Somebody came to you, especially since you spent time in Los Angeles, said, Trillium, we want to make a movie about your life. We're going to play it we're going to make a broad blockbuster movie. What actress is playing you?
Oh gosh. Who is the woman? Who was the woman who was in that chess movie? She's the redhead. I don't even know.
Oh, was she in? She was in the movie about the gambling too, wasn't she? The gambling. Jessica Chastain. Is that her name? I think so. I think that's her name. I'm not up to speed on my movie. That's what I was thinking
of, Chastain. I've been told that people said, "Oh, you reminded me of her." Maybe, or also Julianne Moore. I've been told.
Well, Ron Howard's daughter's a.
Oh, is that right?
Redhead too. She was. I think she was the one in the Jurassic Parks. The last few of them. The one where she's Chris Pratt's love interest. I think that's Ron. Is it Dallas. Is that her name? Dallas Howard?
Who knows? I don't. Who knows who would play me?
Well, we
I
got a
don't
bunch
know.
of
Who knows?
them. $500 to buy anything you love. What's it going to be?
I'm really into experiences now, so it would probably be a plane ticket somewhere if I can even find a plane ticket for $500 with my family.
Very cool. But maybe back
Oh
to
yeah,
Montana and
that would be
skiing.
awesome.
There we go. Um, who has the best swing in golf? Anywhere in the world, any tour, any person, not even on a tour. In your opinion, who's got the
Gosh,
best swing?
there are swings that I love looking at, and there are swings that I think are really effective. So, and I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings by saying ineffective. I really miss Anthony Kim. Like his swing was so good looking. I just wish he were
Mm-hmm.
still on tour. I think that Steve Stricker's got a really effective swing. One, it's
Very
simple. It
simple.
doesn't involve a lot of moving parts. I was talking to Chris about that. I think Chris Como on his show. It just doesn't. It works under pressure because it doesn't have a lot of extra.
I tried to do that limited wrist hinge, and I just hit it so
You did?
sideways. Yes, I said I just want to try because I always had a too much wrist. I would get it. I go from flat. It would get so long that it would get too extended, and that would cause me problems. Of course, I started missing it right. So I tried the Stricker move, and I'm like, yeah, this is not working.
Now, if I could take Jason Day's short game and look at that all day, I would.
Ooh. Yeah, very, very, very good, very aesthetically pleasing, and very efficient. Your golf coaching Mount Rushmore, who would you put on there?
Golf coaching Mount Rushmore, who would I put on there? So
you got four people, four to put up there. Who are you going to put?
Have to be McLean and Butch, Jim McLean, Butch Harmon, because they had so much. So it doesn't have to be living. It could be
anybody.
Probably
anyone
John.
You want that?
Probably John
Jacobs.
Golf. You know, he had such a good influence on so many things, and probably Bob Toski. Toski, I had the good fortune of spending some time with him personally, not as much as some of the people that spent lots of time, but he had just such an amazing way of teaching feel, and you know, he has his quirks, but his ability to create pictures and awareness and analogies, I think were just pretty good. And I love his books. I mean, the Touch System for Better Golf was one of his early books, and I just read that over and over, and it just made sense to me as an athlete and as someone who already kind of had a sense of my own body. That made sense to me. So talk about external, like that's all external without, you know, getting heavy into the science about like what to do. So I think he deserves a place up there. John Jacobs had just a great way of working with so many people and talking about ball flights and
he was so simple yet so
effective. That's right. You know, and I think Butch is simple too, but at the same time effective, and really had a great way of taking people onto a golf course and, you know, not screwing up what they had, but building with what they have, you know. And then Jim just took a more scientific approach and said, let's measure. Why guess when we can measure? Let's see what the best players on tour are doing. You know, if we can add a fifth, I'd add Carl Welty. Carl Welty, who put so much time into actually, you know, looking at what players are doing and studying players and studying what they're doing and looking at footage before any of the other technology was available.
That one for coaches has been a newer one, but it's very cool to hear the differences. A lot of similarities, but there have been some differences. And then the last one. Before I say, Toski, I think at one time he was the leading money winner on the PGA Tour. Now, don't quote me, but I think that was correct. And then he also, I almost sure got National Teacher of the Year, that's pretty impressive. I don't care what era.
He was the first player to win $1 million playing on tour.
Wow. So there we go. So even if he wasn't player of the year, to win $1 million for that era, I mean, that's a lot of, and then to know what he did or did what he did in the teaching
Yeah.
industry is, yeah, very
And
special
to be a
individual.
small guy too, like not a big, heavy linebacker.
No,
No,
not by any
they
means.
called him the Mouse.
Yes. The last one, in your opinion, greatest golfer of all time. Who's the GOAT?
Tiger. Tiger had incredible competition, and I love so many of the players that led up to that. Kathy Whitworth with her 88 wins, and Jack Nicklaus clearly with all his majors, and that's hard to deny, right? You can't just say that that's nothing. Tiger came up in an era where, as a black kid, he felt he felt a little of that. So I think that was an extra layer on top of all of it. An only child. There's just a lot of things that he did that were against him. And then look at how he was able to pull off so many wins in such quick succession, and make comebacks and charge ahead. And I think his ability to push through adversity is unmatched.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, and after, I think it's coming up on 4 years of having the podcast, and that has been a question on every single podcast I think I've had. And I said, I would, in looking back at all the answers I've gotten on that, is I would say Tiger is the only person that would take, he's had the effect on the game that Arnold Palmer had, as well as the effect on the game that Jack Nicklaus had. I mean, it'd be very hard to argue against that.
Wow, that's a nice way of thinking about it too.
What do you have coming up? You have classes you're going to be teaching or speaking anywhere, or book you got coming out? What can you tell everybody about?
So everybody kind of had a COVID project. My COVID project was putting out this experimental on-course class called The First Step. So it's basically a digital program. It's $99, and it's for someone that wants to learn how to play, but they're not quite ready to jump into lessons, or they want to go into lessons and make the most of the lessons. So it's basically a prep course and onboarding to get somebody ready to get out there. And I'm building on that. So I'm building a few more courses, and I'm building one for parents and kids. So,
and that's on your website.
That'll be on my website. So keep an eye out for that. And I'll be at the Masters this year. So if anyone's at the Masters, look for me. We'll wave.
I will be there Thursday, so I'll be looking for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not Thursday. I'm sorry, Wednesday. I've got some friends coming in, and in fact, I hope you're there because I want to introduce that their daughter is 10 or 11, and she's now getting heavy into golf. So, and they listen to the show. So if you're going to be there, I'll track you down and introduce you.
My plans
that would be a very cool thing for her.
But if I do make it out early, I'll shoot you a note.
Yes, please, because she would be like, oh wow, because they know who you are, and I don't know if their daughter does yet, but I'm sure she will.
That's fun. Most of my speaking stuff is in the off season, so now that it's starting to, flowers are coming out, starting to warm up. Now I head into kind of the heavy coaching load where I do the fun part, where I'm working with people. Yep,
back outside,
boots on the ground.
And I was looking at your website. So everybody can know it. As I was going over your step-by-step program, the first thing that popped into my mind was John Wooden, as every year he would teach his players how to put their socks on so they wouldn't get blisters. So even if you don't have to be a beginner to check out your site and that class, you can be a seasoned golf veteran, and you can always learn something very basic that will help your game by looking at Trillium's site.
That's it. Thanks, Pete. That's it. Cool. Fun conversation.
Cool. It's been great. It's been great. I mean, you have a fantastic reputation, and you even exceeded that. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. And it was finally great to meet you, and I can't wait to see you at some seminar in the near future.
Likewise, I look forward to it, Pete. And I learned something too. I didn't know what to expect, and I'm really happy. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Awesome. Perfect. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.com. golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353.